right on the minute, so that's great. So we have now another distinguished guest here. Please come to the front. It's Grahame Grieve. We all know him as the Papa of FHIR, and it's a great pleasure to welcome him here in person, and he will give us some insights on FHIR and IHE and his perspective, and especially on IPS. Thank you.
How do the slides work? Can we do that?
Slides?
Should I put them on? I've got them on here.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Hey everybody, thank you for being here. It's nice to see you all in person again. So I started work on FHIR was 11 and a half years ago now, maybe 12. So much for fast. But a key part of what I wanted to do was to reset the working environment between the various health standardization authorities. I had sat in on discussion between HL7 and others. I'd been a party to the negotiation of the MOUs. They were really good documents, and we signed the documents and we filed them and we went on with business. And it didn't seem like a very good way of working to me. So it was a key thing that I wanted to do to change that. And it's funny because a lot of people focus on, you know, the standard, and I talk about the community. But what is it that I did in FHIR? So a couple of slides forward. What is it that I did? That was quick work, thank you, but can you go 2 slides forward? What is it? Oh, I suppose I can, right? Yes, I can. All right. An open community. It's not been to HL7's comfort that anybody can participate in FHIR development, but that was the rule that I had to be open. So technically HL7 members vote, but anybody can be there, anybody can have their say, anybody can make their comments, everybody has to be listened to. So it's open community. An open standard with an open license, a radically open license that anybody can build other licensed material on. That was important to me, that it was open license. That proved to be such a good idea that HL7 went back and rebranded everything as open source. Big deal. I use web-based technology, open, publicly available, big deal. And I wanted to make the MOUs real by giving everybody standard tooling across the picture, making terminology a key part of what we were doing, to bring SNOMED and LOINC closer, and that's slowly playing out as everybody comes to terms with making an integrated tooling system, common publishing framework, common testing process. Okay, so you can tell we are not there yet. Some of those things that I had in mind didn't quite happen the way that I wanted them to, but you know, we're closer. And we demonstrated success iteratively. And what was really important to me is to realize that the different organizations exist. Okay, the truth is that sometimes, in some ways, the different organizations exist because of incompetence and bad decisions in the past. We can be honest about that these days. But also they exist because they do different things. They have different communities gathering together around different value propositions, and they need to respect each other's value proposition. If you can't do that, then you can't work together. So for me, a key part of what FHIR is creating that space where those things bring us all together. And that vision has taken many years to come together, but it has. IHE now publishing with the same publishing stack as HL7. That was a pretty radical proposal back when I dreamed that one up. So, but also ideas that HL7 has are flowing, sorry, IHE has are flowing back to HL7. And we work collaboratively on things. We could work collaboratively more on things, but we have the platform. So IPS is one great example of how that plays out. A common international base. In some ways, it's the lowest common denominator. but it's something that everybody can build on. And I'm really proud of the fact that FHIR's in the picture. I'm really proud that the team's productive and working forwards. I think when I get involved in the FHIR Connectathons for IPS, I realise we still have a long way to go. But I mean, for me, that's job security, right? Are we ever going to get out of work? I don't think so. The most evident feature of IPS for me is a common terminology base. From an implementer's viewpoint, in many countries, it's too high a base to aim for. It's a challenge. From a consumer's point of view, it's too low. And I think increasingly IPS is like huge, and I keep hearing about it from all over most places in the world. There's some very distinct holdouts, but increasingly our focus in IPS will be getting to a reconciled common terminology base. It's a massive outcome. It's really worth it, but it's also going to be costly and expensive. That's my personal prediction. And so IPS for me is really exciting. I would like to see us go further on the commercialization of it. I'd like to see us, and it's on my slides, but I'd like to see us actually define an extension and a package format that is picked up by the operating systems. They know that if they see this extension, this MIME type, it's a health document, which is an IPS with attachments with an access manifest that deals with encryption and access control. I'd like us to do that beyond what IPS is. IPS is a great start, but I'd like us to actually take that commercialization step. I've talked to some of the vendors about that, and they're ready for me to make a proposal, so I'm getting around to it. But it probably lives in IHE land, I'm not sure. We have to figure that out. But for me, that's something we'd like to do so that operating systems automatically know. See a document added to the health document stack. It's an important part of enabling that for non-technical individuals. I do want to talk a little bit about IPS and IPA, because there's a lot of confusion about that. So there's this IPS, the International Patient Summary. There's a document format which has an agreed content model, which is great. You can break it up and deal with the pieces individually. There's not a lot of agreement in the IPS specification about how you get IPSs, what a standardized process for it is. And that's a feature, it's not a criticism, it's a choice about what IPS is. HL7's working on a different specification called IPA. It's an API specification for a common approach to a EHR from a patient's point of view, a consumer access. It's a common approach to all APIs, patient APIs all around the world. These are the things you need to do to get access to the data. And it's got very little agreement about the content that you'll get back. We tell you that if you do this query, you'll get lab content back. Well, I don't tell you anything about the lab content. And so these specifications deal with very different requirements, very different challenges. Like if you're an Apple or you're an Android operating system, you want to access patient data from anywhere, what do you need to do? There's a standard way of doing that. Okay, because we want it to work anywhere, we don't tell you very much about the content that you get back, because that's IPS's business. You can do IPA and IPS, marriage made in heaven, but you don't have to. Lots of countries won't do IPS by choice or other reasons, but they can do IPA. You can do IPA without doing IPS and vice versa. So it has caused a lot of confusion. Is there some kind of conflict between them? There shouldn't be conflict between them. If you get IPS content, when you access IPA, it's all happy, all meets the requirements. In fact, you can ask for an IPS document through IPA. So one is, what is the content agreement that we can agree to? And the other is, forget content agreement, just let's get something. They're different use cases. All right, so where are we going? We are still slowly building community and impetus. Fast or slow is a matter of perspective. But from where I stand, we started with nothing, and we've slowly built a consensus space where we now have the global consortium for eHealth, the global digital health partnership. We have vibrant communities in HL7 and IHE and SNOMED and Loink, and those, they are not being harmed by working together. We continue to show that that's beneficial for all participants, and we continue to do that iteratively, and that means that we still have forward momentum. From where I stand, okay, I stand in the FHIR bubble, but for me that's never been about a technology, it's been about building a community, and still that is growing, and we're getting more faith and more commitment and more belief. We need to develop and invest in coordination structures like Gemini, and that's probably, we took a big step back on those because in the pandemic, operational things became easier, but resolution things became, and relationship building became much harder, and Gemini's in that space. So hopefully that can start moving forward again. I did want to mention that I defined something called the FHIR community process. If you are not an HL7 person or an IHE person or a SNOMED person, if you're just a vendor, yeah, FHIR profiles and FHIR implementation guides and rules about FHIR thrown at you from all directions. Who do you listen to? Who can you trust? The FHIR community process says, if you want the community to trust you, you need to make some promises to them about the way you develop content. In transparency and accountability, a guaranteed way to actually create issues, or a publicized way. You need to have longevity arrangements in place. IHE meets all these, HL7 meets all these. Like the standards development organizations do, that's what they do. They just need to say, this is, if you know the FHIR community process, then this is how the language we use to meet those requirements, right? It's the national bodies that don't always meet those because they're not focused on the community, they're focused on the project and the politicians. And sometimes they do, not all of them. Or, you know, companies or some professional body that suddenly existed to do a problem, and they'll be gone in 2 years' time, and everybody will be left holding their implementation guide going, now what? So the FHIR community process, which I'm going to start pushing much more now, is a set of requirements that everybody who produces FHIR content, implementation guides, profiles, can sign up to and say, this is our promise that we're a good community player for all implementers. For IHE and HL7 others, it's simply, these are the rules, this is how we meet those rules. But for other players, it's intended to be more onerous, to force you to meet the kind of development processes and rules and practices that we have because they're good for the community. That's why we, HL7, IHE and others, have them. And it's, everybody's going to be held to that standard, and the community can say, we can trust this content because developed with those rules. And for me, that's a key part of lifting everybody to that base that we're, IHE and HL7 are already at. So thank you very much. Jürgen's walked out, so I got the floor. I know he's at the back, so I got the floor till he says no. So questions until he says we're done. Or comments. Oh, he's running. You better be quick. And no one's going to need questions anyway, so. No, we have time. Yeah. Go ahead. Any questions for? Yeah, just yeah. Thanks very much for the presentation.
Yeah, thanks very much
Pleasure.
for the presentation. Really enjoyed it. You said you're going to focus now, Grahame, on pushing forward the FHIR community. What's your plans in that space?
Well, the FHIR community, I specifically did the FHIR community process there. I'm going to try and push that forward and hold it out to everybody and say these rules for you to meet. The FHIR community as a whole is beyond pushing. It's unmanageably huge from my perspective. You know, one part of the activities that I do is just to ensure that the publishing pipeline keeps running. And the publishing pipeline does keep running mostly, and we keep producing content and not holding our partners back. That's like a foundational precondition. We are still working on building the FHIR community in new countries, particularly omics countries. We had thought that it would be a much better fit to them, but it's still proven really difficult to build community because, you know, the foundation of a community is trust in each other. And it's harder for them to find that trust in not in each other, but in the fact that they can have longevity. Because we kind of take longevity for granted, but when I look at the wider community, I see that it's a huge challenge. And so we will continue to, there's a group of us who will continue to evangelize trust building and community building in the omics countries. That's certainly something we still want to execute on. We continue to work to support the national projects and try and make sure that the national projects feed back to what we're doing early rather than late. But it's really hard. It's really hard to get the national projects to do that. One thing that's not well understood, that I encourage all of you to try and make well understood, is that using a standard is a more expensive option than not using a standard. So many people don't understand that. The first time you do something, you do it with a standard, you immediately encounter everybody in the world's requirements and you don't know what yours are. It's terrifying and it's a huge cognitive dissonance, cognitive leap. And so many people look at that and go, I just can't afford to use a standard. And yet everyone's running around going, using standards is cheaper. And that dissonance is something you should teach, that using a standard is more expensive the first time. The second time, it's cheaper. Third time, it's dirt cheap. It's over the hump. But that we need to talk more about the hump to build community. I've always thought that. And I decided earlier this year that I'm going to start pushing that more. I can't think of anything else.
Thanks for your work.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have time for more questions. Anyone? Robin?
Yeah, hi, Robin from IHE UK. I just want to pick up on your longevity of the, of the government organisations. I keep on encountering everywhere I go how much IHE has in common, how much CDAs have in common, how much FHIR has in common, because we all refer back to data models of people and events in their lives and their healthcare. So there's got to be commonality there. And I kind of feel like if some archaeologist picked up some FHIR bundle in the future, they would see, when they decoded it, something that matches a natural space. So is there a kind of nature which might give these things a longevity, even if the governments that manage them don't have that longevity?
I just feel that you can think about the things that we do in layers. The first layer is patient management, ADTs and HL7 V2. When I first started working in interoperability space 27 years ago, it was hard to get ADTs to work, and now you just expect them to work and you're really surprised when they don't. And that convergence over a 30-year period has got us to a point where, yeah, that should work. When it comes to clinical summary, yeah, all of us know this, you can look around the world and look at clinical summaries and they're all pretty much the same thing. You know, I can tell you where they differ in, say, allergy intolerance and medications. And so 90% of them are constant and common between us all, even though we describe them really differently. It's painful, but then you get to the other 10% and it all falls apart, because there we start to radically differ and it gets really hard. And an archaeologist would be just looking at it going, I have no idea what to do about this. But then the next layer up, we get to clinical process, business process, and we're all over the place. There is no commonality. Regulation, culture, language, jurisdiction totally drive radically different approaches. And you just have to sit in a domain reconciliation work group at FHIR, at a FHIR meeting, HL7 meeting, to hear the incredible breadth of perspective. And I constantly have people calling, emailing me or talking to me going, you guys have no idea what you're doing in FHIR. Can't you get a simple resource correct? And I'm like, wait till you sit in the process and listen to just how different people are. And then we're going to get to the learning healthcare system stuff that we're adding to FHIR now, where we don't even know what the people are thinking right now, right? So it's stages, and each approach is different, and we should treasure and cultivate the commonality that we have and do our best to drive out our unnecessary differentiation. But we will always have massive amounts of necessary differentiation, no choice.
Great, thank you. Right in time. Thank you very much. Applause.